Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special Chats with Children. But today I'm delighted to be joined by Fran Degrazio, and we are going to be talking about the history and future of sterile pharma packaging. And the reason we're doing this is actually for those people who know Fran already. She was at West Pharmaceuticals for many, many years, speaking at lots of events like PDA and ISPE about sterile pharma packaging. And she recently retired, sadly, but she's set up her own consultancy. And she's now president and principal consultant at Strategic Parenteral Solutions, and also Kymanox Executive Advisor as well. And because she's doing all these things, I thought, what an ideal time to grab Fran and pick her brains on sterile pharma packaging. So we've actually going to do a series looking at, as I say, the history and the future of sterile pharma packaging. So Fran, first of all, it's wonderful to see you. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, I really appreciate you agreeing to do this with me. And just for that, I put the Phillies jersey and the Eagles baseball cap up just to make you feel comfortable.
Looking good.
Good, excellent. Now, as I said, you have worked in the industry for a long time. So rather than me just giving a sort of a detailed overview of your history, perhaps you'd like to give viewers a quick background on what you've done in the past and also what you're doing now.
Okay, well, thanks. We'll try to do this quickly. And I was, as Rizwan mentioned, at West Pharmaceutical Services for about 39 years, starting in the analytical labs and have led many different roles, product development, quality, regulatory, technical, customer support. So in my last role, actually over the last couple of years before I retired, was as Chief Scientific Officer, and I was part of our corporate development and strategy team. So now with my retirement, started my own consultancy, really advising senior leaders. And also as a part of that, as was mentioned, I have the real thrill to be able to work with Kymanox, who focuses in the area of combination products, and as part of their Kymanox Executive Advisor team. So just looking forward to staying involved somewhat with the industry.
That's brilliant. Well, I'm very, very lucky to have you here to talk about this. So thank you very much for taking time out to talk to me. Now, as I said, viewers, we are actually looking back and ahead around parenteral packaging. And we're doing this in three sections. So section one, really, which we're going to cover today, is looking at the 1980s to 2000, looking at the modern history of parenteral packaging development. We're then going to, if you like this video enough, and I can't stress it enough, we will do part two, where we're going to be looking at 2000 to 2022. And the developments there, and really look at the innovation in the packaging industry. And finally, our last chats with children on this will be looking at the future and what the future holds around parenteral packaging. So look out for those future episodes as well. But this first episode, as I said, is looking back at the 1980s to 2000. So from my very first question for you is looking way back when into the 80s. What was the pharma landscape when you first started in pharma?
Well, back in those days, right, it was really all small molecule. So, it was chemically derived drugs, and the format for the container was a glass vial and a rubber stopper, right, with an aluminum seal. So really, when you talk about innovation, there wasn't a whole lot of transformational type of innovation, certainly early on during that time period.
Right. Okay. So what would you say then from your perspective were some of the main challenges that you faced over that period?
Yeah, there certainly were a series of different challenges. I think, one of the, if you want to say, one of the overall themes was that back in those days, I think the industry, not only the drug industry, but the packaging industry, was more of what they would consider black magic or art, right, as to how the packaging was developed.
Right.
And so I think and I can give you a few examples of some of the challenges that occurred. It was a lack of true scientific understanding around certain aspects. So, as an example, there was an issue with extractables in a lyo chamber, right? So a certain lyophilization cycle that would actually literally pull extractables out of the elastomer and redeposit them in the chamber.
Right.
The issue then was that the next series of drug that went into that chamber had the extractables redeposited back on it, right? So now it's being contaminated by something that's foreign. So that's a simple example. Another example was just, it also has to do with lyophilization, but moisture. Lyophilization, of course, is freeze drying. The concern back then was to always try to find an elastomer that had a very good barrier to moisture, so a very low moisture vapor transmission rate. But what we learned was that it's more than just MVT. It's also, looking at and understanding the composition of the rubber so that when it goes through steam sterilization, it absorbs, but can it desorb that moisture very easily? Because if not, then that rubber stopper is on that lyophilized product, and over time, the moisture can just migrate. So that's a second example. And there may be a totally different example that has nothing to do with lyophilization, but again, back in the day, there were dental plungers used for things like lidocaine. Right. There were actually a certain point in time where the lidocaine currently has, and did back then, epinephrine. The epinephrine is used to constrict the blood vessels so that the lidocaine stays in place, right? If not, it would flow through your body. But there was certain reactive materials that could come out of some of the rubber formulations that actually could interact with that epinephrine. So when you talk about compatibility too, it's understanding it's more than just the active ingredient. It's understanding the science behind the drug product and the packaging itself.
Right. And what were the general beliefs surrounding parenteral packaging in the 1980s and earlier? What were the general beliefs surrounding parenteral packaging?
Well, I think the belief, one of the major beliefs, and it's not only around the elastomer, it's around the glass, was that it was inert, right? And so, this thought process was, let's just grab whatever we had, right? So back in those days, in the drug industry, that's what they did, right? So maybe someone had some rubber stoppers in their drawer that they kept, and there wasn't really this scientific understanding of what's best for the drug product. And I think, as we all learned, not only can rubber elastomers be reactive, but so can glass. And certainly we saw that later in the 2000s, where we started to see a lot of glass particulate issues.
So what do you think then helped drive innovation during that period? I mean, was there sort of a light bulb moment that suddenly people went, actually, right, this is why we need to change. We need to get more analytics involved and more data involved in the process?
Well, I think, part of it, certainly there were specific issues like some of the examples I gave earlier. But one of the areas that I think really began to take hold was around CCI, which is container closure integrity. And so CCI, they were starting to, during that time period, develop coatings for elastomers. And also there was not, for instance, as much understanding around the dimensions in glass that really needed to be controlled. And so due to a combination of those things, you really ultimately ended up with some CCI issues that, again, we've learned a lot from, and, but there's still ongoing challenges, certainly with current and future packaging as you move forward.
And looking back at that period then, how would you sum it up then in terms of, from a sort of parental packaging period, how would you sum it up then for parental packaging for the period of the 80s to the 90s?
I guess how I would sum it up is that it was not driven so much by science, more so by experience, or more driven from a supplier perspective from manufacturability, right? So, what was good and easy to manufacture, whether it be with glass vials or rubber elastomers. And it wasn't so much about, what was the total impact, the holistic impact to the drug product.
That's interesting you should say that. So not patient-centric at all then in that respect then?
Unfortunately, that I think is sums it up. And I think there's really two, if you want to call it, customers from a supplier perspective. One is the pharmaceutical company, right?
Sure.
Because the reality is they need to be able to take the product and run it on their equipment, and it needs to be compatible with their drugs. But certainly the ultimate customer is that end patient. And so that's really definitely a way that through the years the industry has changed.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you for giving me that overview of that period. Now we are going to, in the next episode, look at a period which has developed rapidly, which is the 2000 to 2022, and obviously the rise of biologics and so on. So viewers, I hope you found that interesting. If you've got any comments for Fran based on what she just talked about today, then please put them in the comments below, because I'm sure Fran will be only too happy to get them and get your feedback on what she said today. And also we'll put the links to Fran directly so you can contact her if you'd like to know more about her services as well. So Fran, thank you very much for giving me that whirlwind tour, if you like, of the 80s to 2000 in terms of parental packaging. And I look forward to catching up with you to talk about the period of the 2000 to 2022 as well. Thanks very much. And viewers, I hope you found that interesting. Fran, thank you very much for your time. And viewers, thank you for watching. Until next time, stay well and stay safe. Bye-bye.